Good morning and afternoon to those in Europe. Welcome to the September 24th Ask Me Anything email with the Baltimore WordPress Meetup group. If you have questions about the Baltimore Meetup group, you can visit our website at envira.com/Baltimore WordPress Meetup. Recordings for the Baltimore WordPress Meetup and links that were shared in the chat will be available approximately 2 weeks after the meetup, sometimes a little bit longer. If you want to speed this process up, you can contact me at jen@envira.com to sponsor the meetup and help encourage this speed along. Links that were sent in the Zoom chat during the meetup will be available at the end of the recording on YouTube. The Baltimore WordPress Meetup is informational. Please use the information, products, and services that we show at your own risk. Just because we are showing a website, plugin, theme, service, etc., is not an official WordPress endorsement of that. Above all, always keep it family friendly. Many of us are attending from home and have family members of all different ages in the background. We will do our best to follow the WordPress Meetup community standards. That means that if you disobey any of these rules, you will be evicted from the meeting. No spamming or spammer-like behavior. We have people of all different skill levels and backgrounds, so no judgment for people who are at a different level than where you are at. We all have something to learn in life. And above all, don't be a jerk. A few thank yous to our sponsors before we get into the content of today's meetup. Our first sponsor is Envira.com. Envira helps companies serious about their WordPress development needs to solve their challenges. They specialize in helping agencies and businesses that are frustrated by their WordPress challenges. If you're looking for help or more about Envira, visit envira.com/help. Our next sponsor is the Easy Alley Guide. The Easy Alley Guide works to make web accessibility easier to implement through done-for-you tools and processes. For more information on web accessibility, including tools, tutorials, and more, please visit easyalleyguide.com. And I'm sharing these links in the chat. Our final sponsor to thank is OB Digital Consulting. OB sponsors our video recordings for our meetups and prepares them for YouTube. If you have video production needs, please contact obdigitalconsulting.com for assistance. Some quick admin before we get to the questions. This is an Ask Me Anything email setup. So we will be using the chat for quick questions and to queue people up. So please find your Zoom chat, open your Zoom chat, and we will queue people there. If you have a short question, you can just type your question into the Zoom chat. If you want to speak your question, you can just put a question mark into the Zoom chat. And of course, no one knows everything, and we will do our best to try and help you. To get us started off, I've prepared a couple of questions to start. Troy.
Hello.
Hello, Troy. And before we actually get to the questions, it would be great if you wanted to give us just a short little snippet about yourself.
Name's Troy Glancy. I provide tech support for website agencies, website designers, and marketers. Pretty much behind the scenes stuff where to help with your email, website issues, vacation support, migrations, Cloudflare hosting, anything along the tech side of stuff. I work with designers and marketers because they love to make the great websites they have for their customers, but they hate the tech stuff, and that's why I take over.
Thank you so much, Troy. So our first question for you is going to be types of email. There's 3 main types of email: transactional, marketing, and direct. And can you give us a quick overview of the different types and reasons why you don't want to smash them together?
Yeah. So transactional emails are normally the ones that like contact forms getting sent from your website or e-commerce orders, those type of things. You usually use a service like Postmark to send those. Some people like to use Google to send through that type of stuff, but you should never ever do that. You should always use a transactional email service such as Postmark to send all transactional emails from your website. Google does not like you just dumping emails through their system. That's strictly for direct type emails. The marketing related one, same thing. Google does not like that at all. you need to use MailChimp or some related email service to send your emails out, because they guarantee that stuff will be delivered correctly. When you're routing through Google or Microsoft, you have a high chance of it getting blocked because of spam reason. And of course, the normal direct emails directly email someone from your platform you're currently using, Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, or sometimes your hosted platform.
Great, thank you. Now we are going to get into the DNS records. So can you quickly explain what a DNS record is, and then what Cloudflare is? And then we've got our first DNS record, MX, up on the screen.
Yeah, so the MX records are kind of like the phone book for the DNS records. It tells the email servers on the internet where's your email located. It could be hosted at Google, it could be hosted at Microsoft 365, be hosted with your current web host. It just depends on where it is. But the MX records tell those servers around the world when you someone sends you the email where it's located. And that's how it all gets delivered. Without proper MX records, it won't be delivered correctly. And Cloudflare is a DNS service, IAM security service that I highly recommend everyone uses if you have a website. They stop most of your spam, your bots, hackers right off the bat because of their global network they have that monitors and detects different spammers and hackers around the world trying to attack other sites, and it applies to all their sites behind them.
Great. Now some more DNS records. These come up all the time in email discussions. So if you can quickly go through SPF, DKIM, and DMARC.
Yeah, so these are the three we have now. Originally, it started with SPF. It was a sender framework policy or policy framework, and what it did is authenticate, saying that hey, if you're listed with an IP address or a record or MX record or the include records, these are authorized to send emails on your behalf. But then we had issues where you only have a certain amount of SPF records that you can have listed. So then people start using DKIM, which is the host related ones. So some MailChimp providers use this. Sometimes use CNAMEs as well to authenticate. Your web host may use a DKIM. And this is another authentication, just like SPF, just to make it all work. But then they realized that we're having issues with spam now. And so that's when DMARC came in the world. DMARC pretty much looks at SPF and DKIM and aligns it and verifies that this is legitimate. And you set your DMARC policy based on how you want emails to go out. So if someone is sending emails as you, could be legitimate, could be a hacker. The DMARC policy states what happens. So right, this one right here, it says quarantine. So any email sent on your behalf as your email address is going to be quarantined to spam once it receives in someone's mailbox. If you have the reject policy, it will straight up reject the email and it'll never get delivered. Now, there was a situation recently where Google and Yahoo started their whole you must have a DMARC policy, and everyone started saying these like marketing companies and MailChimp stuff like that, oh, just put a none record just to make it work. Yes, you can do the none record, but you're not blocking anything. You're pretty much saying allow the phishing emails to come through, allow the hackers to send emails to whoever as me. It doesn't matter. I don't care. And I mean, there were situations where I had customers in the past that one actually got an email. He was a publisher. So he got an email from one of his clients that he talks to all the time. They do transactions all the time, that said, hey, can you send my new deposit for $10,000 to this bank account information? And so sure enough, that person says, yeah, we do it all the time. They changed the bank account information, sent it right over to the wrong bank account, and the hacker got $10,000, and that was it. And then they had to go to their bank and had to deal with a bunch of legal stuff trying to get their money back. But if they had a proper DMARC policy, such as reject, that email from the spammer would never came in.
Okay, great. So now we are going to go to open questions. So write your question into the chat if it's a short one. If you'd like to speak your question, please put a question mark into the chat so that we can queue you up. Randy has a question in the chat. Can you explain the DMARC XML file sent to the admin?
What's that related to?
Randy, would you like to unmute?
Yes, so I turned on DMARC on one of my websites.
Oh, okay.
And so I get the email sent to me in XML format, and there's some that say pass, there's some that say fail, and I'm just trying to understand what emails each one of those are associated with.
So the XML portion is really hard to read. It's better to use Cloudflare's DMARC service or Postmark. Cloudflare's I like better, but it will send you a nice, in the Postmark one they have, which I'll only post this link in here. The Postmark one will send you a weekly email of who is sending on your behalf. So it'll show that, hey, MailChimp sent these emails out total. Here's ones that passed DKIM. Here's ones that passed SPF. You can have either one with a DMARC policy. You don't have to have both. It's good to have both, but you just have to have one, either SPF or DMARC policy. I mean, SPF or DKIM for DMARC to pass it. You want to use one of these services just to decipher it, because those XMLs are really hard to read. And so if you have Cloudflare, they have one built in that you can automatically set up. If not, you use this Postmark one to get the friendly looking emails of who's sending on your behalf and stuff like that.
Thank you.
All right, our next question is from Becky. What about BIMI?
So you can set up the BMI. There's a free way of doing it. And of course, there's the paid way of doing it. It's totally up to you. I personally don't do it myself. It's just an identifier to show like your logo and stuff like that. Totally up to you. I personally haven't really set it up. I know how to set up, but it's never really dealt with it because I didn't see a reason for it. So it's totally up to, it's a personal preference if you want to do it or not.
Okay. Again, people, just go ahead and put your questions into the chat or a question mark if you'd like to speak. So our next one is from Catherine. Is it considered acceptable to use an email like no reply at domain name as an outgoing address if the domain has proper DNS records, but the email doesn't exist?
You could. I personally hate the do not reply stuff. If someone is sending me an email about, or like I sign up someone, I need to contact them, I don't want to go through the process of finding the email and stuff like that. It's always good to have a return address so they can reply back to it if they need to. A lot of times you want to use, if you get a lot of emails from customers, you want the proper channels. Hopefully you can route those emails to your system you have. So if you have a ticket system, if you have the reply to address, even though if you have it come out with no reply, but have the reply to address go to your ticket system, that'll be the best way of doing it. So it can go back to your proper channels.
All right, our next question is from Terry. A booking plugin sends notifications regarding bookings. The plugin recommends going through a WordPress SMTP plugin, which then suggests SendGrid, but sometimes the email doesn't go through. She's not sure how to troubleshoot it. The free version doesn't include mail logging.
Yeah, you really need to log in to figure out what's going on. If it's sending off your website and SendGrid is collecting it, you hopefully will have the logs on SendGrid's in. But if not, you need to have that logging on the website itself. I personally like the post SMTP one when I need to track for logging, or I use like Postmark itself. Postmark has their own plugin to do everything. And Postmark's a service I use for all transactional type email service. And so they have their plugin and I can check everything between there.
So I'm just tossing a couple of these into the chat. I think this is the post SMTP one.
Don't get it.
They changed.
They changed it recently. So I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully
hopefully
it still
sure.
gives you free logs. They used to. I can't remember if they still do, but since I switched to the Postmark one, I just use that for everything. I just said the WP mail logs successful send, but I don't get it. So I mean, that could be several things. It could be if you don't have the proper SPF record or DKM record, or your DMARC policy may be blocking the emails from sending on behalf of them. So you have to make sure you have all the records set up correctly with SendGrid if you're sending through them. So they give you, I think, a DKIM. I don't think they give you SPF records. So you have to make sure you have those within your DNS. And then your DMARC policy also needs to have something. So if you have no DMARC policy whatsoever, that's a possibility that that's why it's not even being delivered. You need to have something, even if it's none. I don't like using none. It's always good to have quarantine reject, but you have to make sure your DMARC is set up properly before you go to the quarantine reject stages, which means all providers that are sending on your behalf. So if you're using SendGrid, for instance, you need to make sure you have all their records in your DNS settings. And if you're using Google Workspace, all their records need to be in your DNS settings. And if your website is sending stuff not through SendGrid itself, you need to make sure the IP address is listed as a sending record on your SPF, or DMARC is going to just not work correctly with the reject and quarantine.
I've got showing on the screen right now, mailtester.com, which is a great service to just send an email from your website to this, and it will tell you whether or not, give you a score and give you suggestions on what to do.
I'm gonna post one too I like using. This is another one I like to use too. So you same type of setup. You send an email to them. So I think Mail Tester gives you like a score, but the Learn DMRC one gives you like the records. They'll say is your SPF correct, your DMARC correct, your DKIM correct, and stuff like that. And it'll show you passing scores. This is the one I use for testing anytime I have issues and stuff to make sure what's not correct and what is correct.
Right. So
Go on.
if you're using SendGrid, SendGrid itself should have logs available to you, which will
Yep.
say what is going on with the emails, which is frequently helpful.
Yeah,
So
and which a lot of times is literally your DNS records that's stopping you. And if it's going through the SMTP app and SendGrid's collecting it and you're not getting afterwards, it's most likely a DNS setting. You're missing some record. And if you want to send me a message after this call, I can look and see what you got.
All right. For the folks joining us, remember to put your question into the chat. If it's short, if you have a longer question or want to speak your question, you can just put a question mark into the chat.
Anyone else have any questions?
Also, while we're waiting for questions, Troy, do you happen to have the link to your Cloudflare rules handy? And Eric added a comment in the chat. SendGrid is unreliable with Yahoo-based addresses, and that doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yes, I hate SendGrid. SendGrid is the worst, especially their free. Well, I don't know if they still do a free plan, but their lower end plans, they're notorious for getting caught on blacklists all the time. I'm literally like Postmark is the only service I recommend these days. I mean, I've been through a bunch of them. MailChimp had their own. Mandrill I used for a bit, and then SendGrid. Postmark is the only one that I found the most reliable. Yeah, so yeah, that's Postmark. It's worth the paying the money. It's $15, I think. Well, they have a free account for 100 emails per month, I think, and it's $15 for unlimited, or no, up to 10,000, something like that. SendGrid one, yeah, you're definitely on the free plan. You're getting hit with their blacklists, and they don't care. They're notorious for deliverability issues. I would definitely switch to someone else like Postmark, even if you just do their free plan for things 100 emails a month, I think. But it's definitely worth it. And with Postmark as well, if you have customers that you're managing their websites, you can add them to your Postmark account.
All right, we got a question in the chat. How do you use the mail tester or the Learn DMARC with MailChimp?
You can't really do it with MailChimp. That's mostly for sending as you, but the mail testers will show if you're sending out such as a marketing email off MailChimp out on your behalf. Depending on how you have it set up, sometimes MailChimp will just send it out as them and have the reply to address as you. It depends on how it's set up. Different providers do different things, but the testers are more for like your own personal email to make sure stuff gets sent correctly. MailChimp's responsible for their own things for deliverability. And yes, I agree with Eric. Mailgun and Brevo are definitely the best. Mailgun is I forgot it's all about them. They're the other ones I used to test before I went to Postmark. They're definitely one of the best ones.
All right, so while we're here and waiting for some more questions, we can quick take a look at your Cloudflare rules. You had mentioned earlier in the meetup that you put every website behind Cloudflare.
Yep.
And you also have a bunch of rules which you've written out on your site, which are fabulous and very helpful. So if you want to just quick talk us through some of these rules.
Yeah, so Cloudflare's free plan is fantastic and it does block a lot. But I had an e-commerce client that got a lot of traffic, and even on the business plan and pro plans, they still had some weird traffic coming in that was just wasting resources on their website. So over the years, this is version 3. So over the years, I've been optimizing Cloudflare rules for the free plans, so anyone can use them, and they work. I mean, they work great. They block resources, block spammers, block the scrapers and stuff like that. So like the first rule we have is the allow rule, which makes sure that Google, Bing, Facebook, all legitimate bots come through. And these rules are based on the rules that Cloudflare has. They have a verified bot rule and they have a radar verified bot rule. And so the rules I have actually show say, hey, allow these guys come in, and then you can add your own in there. Yeah, pull the screenshot. I'm trying to do it in memory. So we have the known bots and verified bots. So the known bots and verified bots are provided by Cloudflare. The reason I have Let's Encrypt and Acme Challenge in here is because Let's Encrypt likes to add new IP addresses without notifying Cloudflare of their new IP addresses. So I had some situations where Let's Encrypt will get a new server in England or Europe, and then it won't go through and it won't validate correctly, and your SSL won't renew. So that's why that record's in there. But this is also the same rule. You'll add your own third-party services. Like some services like SEO services might like to tag into your website to check things. Well, if you don't have them on here, you don't really guarantee that they're going to be allowed to come through. And so this pretty much guarantees them, hey, you're allowed to come through. You're allowed free access to the website and do what you want. And you go down a little further, that's just modifying it. So go to aggressive crawler. So open up the screenshot for me. So the aggressive crawler, you see some search engine bots in here. You also see Yandex and Baidu, which is China and Russia's search engine bots. I don't like them tagging on my site because I don't do anything international, and they're just very aggressive. So I have them on here to automatically block them out if they touch the site. And then I have some random rules here for different things. Like we have like the site audit bots within these ASN numbers, which means their IP ranges that they normally use. Go ahead and block them out. We have anyone who's using random spider rule or it says bot in their user agent. Just go ahead and block them out. Just check them. It doesn't really block them. It has a managed challenge, which normally does block them unless they're a legitimate person. And that's why I use the managed challenge portion. And then we have country large providers. Go ahead and open up that screenshot for me. So this reason I created this rule is we have these AS numbers in the very top one are Google, Microsoft, and Amazon's hosted servers that you can rent from them. Well, there was a lot of situations where hackers will create an Amazon account or Google account and spool up a quick server, do some attacks, and then shut it down. And they'll do it again, shut it down, create another account, repeat the process over and over and over and over. And Cloudflare won't really detect those because they're coming online and shutting down. And so I create these rules to if they're within these ASN numbers, which is like I think the first one's Amazon, might be Google, Bing, one of those things. Microsoft. I can't remember which ones are exact, but they're not listed as a known bot from Cloudflare or a verified bot. Then go ahead and check them and make sure they can't access the site with a managed challenge. And the second rule has the United States because that's my primary country. So I deal with customers outside the US, but not a lot of junk comes from outside the world too, on the internet. So this rule will say if they're not in the United States, just check them. Just check them with the Cloudflare check to make sure that they're not a bot. And same thing, if they're outside the US and they're a known bot or in the categories that Cloudflare recommends, let them come through. And then, of course, I have the Acme challenge in here again, just to be safe because of the Let's Encrypt thing. And then the Facebook query, because I've actually got blocked by Facebook once because they couldn't scan my site. So that's why I have that Facebook query in there. So it doesn't, if it has that query and they're trying to log into the site, just let them come through because they actually blacklisted my website once because they said their bot couldn't read me.
All right, the next one is challenge path.
Yeah, so the challenge path, go and open up that screenshot. So a lot of people use VPNs, good people and bad people. And there's a majority of bad people use VPNs. So I just figured out the AS numbers that a lot of VPN providers use. So they can get managed challenged by Cloudflare just to get checked. It doesn't block anybody. It just checks them. So if someone is legitimately behind a VPN, they're a normal user, they're at a coffee shop or they like being behind a VPN, they will just get a check from Cloudflare saying they just want to check them out and then let them through the site. But a lot of bad actors like to use VPNs to do attacks on websites. And so what this does is check them before they get to your website so they don't waste your resources, they don't scrape your site, they don't try to attack your site. And then, of course, we have the WP login one up there. Well, this every login page, just have it check the login pages. And then open a screenshot of this one. All right, so this one,
web host, path,
yeah.
and tours.
So this one's pretty aggressive. I do recommend doing managed challenge on this one. On the screenshot, I do have it blocked. But what these are AS numbers of IP addresses that I've collected over years. There's like GoDaddy up there. There's Bluehost. There's a bunch of other web hosts up there. And the AS number is pretty much, hey, GoDaddy owns this AS number, which means they have access. They own these 1 million IP addresses. they're all within an AS number. So if GoDaddy's address have 1 million IP addresses they owned on their network, they have an AS number showing which ones they owned. And so what this does is says if it's in one of these AS numbers, which could be like GoDaddy, go ahead and block it or manage challenge it. If they try to access XML RPC on your website, block it or manage challenge it. If they try to access WP-config or WLW manifest, block or challenge it. This is the new one Cloudflare is doing now. So you got verify bot. If it's an AI crawler or other, go ahead and manage challenge or block it. And then of course Tor, which is the onion network, the dark web. A lot of people use it legitimate, but there's also a lot of bad actors who use it. If they're within there, they need to get checked or blocked. On this rule, I have it as blocked, but situations arise sometimes where someone may be using a VPN legitimately that is behind a hosted AS number. They may get hit by the block. So sometimes you want to have the managed challenge. So at least it'll block the bots, the hackers, spammers, and stuff like that. But legitimate users will get checked by Cloudflare, and 5 seconds later, they're on your website. And these are just other things like I disable onion routing on Cloudflare. Even though legitimate people use it, it's just a lot of bad actors use it as well. And you also want to whitelist your server IP address on your whatever server is sending, has access, whatever your website is hosted on, you want their IP in there so cron jobs will work. You don't want your crons to fail and stuff like that.
Okay, we got a question from the chat from Randy. I deal exclusively with WordPress sites. Can you compare WordFence versus Cloudflare?
Yes. So WordFence is strictly a security plugin, and they try to block by IP addresses, kind of like Cloudflare does, but they also try to block based on injections and different types of ways people are trying to hack a website. So they are just a plugin on your website after they get to your website. Cloudflare is the front end. It's like the firewall at your office. So the firewall, like if you're working in a corporate world, you used to have a firewall that protected everyone inside from the outside world. Cloudflare is the firewall for your website. And so all the bad stuff gets checked before they even get through to your website. And then WordFence can take over afterwards. There's no problem using both. I don't usually use both myself. Cloudflare does a pretty good job. And then I have my own server that has its own security rules. It's all set up, and a good host will have a lot of things for security rules to block stuff. You don't really need to use a plugin. I just don't like to use plugins myself. But Cloudflare's free plan blocks a lot of stuff, especially if you use these Cloudflare rules. And you also have the pro plan that can block SQL injections and attacks like that. Same stuff WordFence can do on the pro plans before they get to your website. And
also, any of these plugins are happening in the PHP layer, which means they're acting in the same layer as WordPress. So if someone does get in and hack your site, they can actually whitelist themselves with your security plugin. So your security plugin doesn't even detect malware anymore because it has whitelisted itself.
Yeah. So I mean, Cloudflare is definitely the front line of defense. Everyone should use it. I mean, before Cloudflare, I think it was 10 years ago, I was hosting agencies and stuff like that, doing reseller hosting, and we would get like 60, 70,000 attacks on the web server, people trying to just brute force into different things. And once I found Cloudflare, I started implementing clients saying you have to use this, or sorry, you got to host someone else. And it's a requirement these days. I do not host, manage, or really deal with any websites that's not behind Cloudflare, because it stops most of junk. Most of the crap you'll deal with your resources being overloaded, spammers hitting your contact forms, and stuff like that. Cloudflare can stop a lot of that. And even if you're using Cloudflare, you have their turnstile, which is also a Rechapia type thing for the contact forms. Every client that I've dealt with has had issues with spam on their forms, even behind Cloudflare sometimes. Putting them on that turnstile from Cloudflare pretty much stops everything in its tracks. Same with the e-commerce sites. It stops fake orders. It does a fantastic job. And that's also free, the turnstile.
Yes, the turnstile is limited to 10 sites per plan on the free, though. So if you have a bunch of different clients, they should have their own Cloudflare account so that they own their own domains, their own DNS records, and also so that when you add turnstiles to their accounts, it doesn't count against you.
But you can also put 100 per API key if you want on your own account, if you don't care about the analytics.
Again, questions, just put them into the chat, or if you want to speak your question, just put a question mark into the chat.
You guys Cloudflare questions too, if you have any Cloudflare questions.
Yes, and you can also put Cloudflare questions in. With the Cloudflare rules, you have anything that might prevent postmark emails from going through.
No, because the Cloudflare rules are strictly for accessing your website. If postmark emails are not going through, that will be related to your DNS records, your DKM record, or your DMARC policy. This is Cloudflare rules are strictly for people going to your website. Won't affect anything with email. Now, you want to make sure if you're using Cloudflare, you do not proxy your MX records. You only want to proxy your @ record, your www record, or any subdomains that may have a website behind them. Everything else should not be proxied.
And that includes when you're setting up things like your verification records. Typically, Mailgun, Postmark, etc., will ask you to add a CNAME record to your DNS records for their service. So that CNAME record, if you proxy it, can cause a lot of problems with the service delivering correctly. We have a question from Becky. What would be the difference between the free version of Cloudflare and the pro version of Cloudflare?
So this is how I determine it. So I put majority of people on the free plan unless they're in the space of e-commerce or political or something that'd be more subject to attacks, because Cloudflare Pro does give you extra security with their WAF rules, which is kind of like how WordFence handles stuff too, but it's better. You have is an application firewall they have that runs on the pro plans. They also give you APO from WordPress, but you can pay $5 a month on the free plan and use APO. APO actually speeds up. It speeds up your website. It's a direct plugin connection with Cloudflare on your website, and it speeds it up. Now, you might have to go to their documentation to give the full detail, but it pretty much becomes a prefetch type service where it gets the information from your website and serves it from their network faster. Pretty much speeds up your website. It's a really good service. I highly recommend it. But free plans work great. Pro plans are strictly if you're subject to a lot of tax, e-commerce, or political. It's normally where I put them on a pro plan. Yeah, so this is the add-ons. $5 a month, or it's included in the pro plans or the business plans, and it just helps with speed up your website, your first time bite, stuff like that. I think they cache most of your content from your website and serve it from their Cloudflare network, which does a tremendous job of speeding stuff up. I use it on my own stuff. Any client that gets a lot of traffic, I'll either use APO or pull on a pro plan, depending on the type of client they are.
Oh, I also wanted to mention that while we're talking about the Cloudflare rules, if you don't have the little orange cloud on your DNS record for your A record and your www record, then the Cloudflare rules won't run.
Correct. You have to have the proxy enabled just for the @ record and www or any subdomains that you may have with websites behind them. The key is websites. If it doesn't have a website behind it, then you should not be using the proxy. Everything else should be wide open.
And here is a link to a Malware Madness, which is an in-depth audit by a number of security companies on why everything you know about your WordPress malware scanner is wrong.
I love Calvin.
Yes, Calvin is absolutely fabulous at security, as is Tom. Again, if you have questions, put them in the chat or add a question mark to the chat. Randy has added a question. While checking SPF on one of my domains, I get the following message. DNS lookup count in your SPF record exceeds the maximum limit of 10.
Yeah, so this is why they actually stopped doing SPF and start using DKIM records for everything, because that exact issue right there. Usually you don't have that many SPF lookups. You have, depending on your email provider and your host, you may have your web host and you may have your email provider like Google Workspace. I have to see what you have in your record, but you could have some old fragmentation from old hosts, or you could have a host that just has a bunch of include records in there, which is looking up a bunch of stuff. If your host has an include record and you have a dedicated IP address on the server, which most servers do for web servers, web hosting, just put the IPv4 colon in the IP address and don't use their include record. and that should bring down the limits. But if you have a provider that has DKIM records, use those instead of the SPF records. Have to see what you have in your records to see what you got.
Regarding Cloudflare, and it has enterprise integrations with some hosting providers. Terry asked the question, her hosting provider, SiteGround, it says that they can activate your own Cloudflare account, or you can use SiteGround's integration with Cloudflare.
Nancy also posted one too. So hang on, let's do Nancy's first. If you're on a managed hosting provider, Nancy, they should be doing the malware scanning for you. They should have something built in already. If they're a true managed provider, they should be scanning their own stuff. I would chat with them to make sure they have something, but most managed providers, depending on who you're hosting with, they should have their own type of scanner scanning your site either weekly or daily, depending on how they have it all set up. I always recommend, Terry, using your own Cloudflare account. You can use SiteGrounds, which all they do though is make it where you have to have www records. All they're doing is forwarding the www record to Cloudflare services, but you can't use it without www. So I always recommend is having your own Cloudflare account, the name servers at Cloudflare. That way you can control it, manage it, and then point the IP address to SiteGround and do it that way. I would never recommend using the hosted provider. Now there are companies like Cloudways that have their enterprise edition, which just is a glorified managed by Cloudways type thing. You are limited on what you can do. They might have some extra features, extra settings that you can get cheaper, but you also lose the usability of making your own custom Cloudflare rules or change your own settings or different things like that, or blocking your own IP addresses, I think, and stuff like that. So I always recommend using your own Cloudflare account versus having your hosting provider handle it. So next one, my SPF. So that's why you got to include regular Bluehost. Bluehost probably has a buttload of IP addresses, and that's why you're getting hit. Now, if you have in your record IPv4 colon and the IP address of your web server, it will probably you can then delete the Bluehost entry and not have to worry about it anymore. But that's literally what's happening.
Thank you.
All right. So please play in DKIM is I thought you need both. You don't need both. If you can do both, it's okay. But then you run into issues like Randy ran to, where you run up too many lookups for the SPF. DKIM always use first if you can. SPF if they have it. Most providers don't do SPF these days. Google does. Google has SPF record. Microsoft does not use SPF records. Your hosted provider may use SPF record for like the IP, or like he had for Glue with Bluehost, that type of stuff. But like delivery services, transactional services, MailChimp, none of them use SPF records anymore. The SPF was the original one, then it came out with DKIM for another authentication, and then DMARC is the final thing now. And with DMARC, you have to have one, either DKIM or SPF. You don't need to have both. Lynn, I'm guessing you're saying you have them using their personal Gmail account, pulling email from your hosted email into their Gmail, personal Gmail, correct? Okay. So you can do it for pulling emails, but they can't really send out as their domain. That's the biggest thing. If they do set it up where you can send out your domain, you run into issues of deliverability. You run into issues of email, of Google not allowing you to go out. You run issues with the DKIM, the SPF records, the DMARC settings. It's always best to have someone on some type of hosted email and not routing through their Gmail. If they like Gmail, they should use Google Workspace. I mean, it's really affordable. It's $7 a month per user. If they are on a budget, use something like MX Route. I think it's like $30 a year or $50 a year or something for that, like that. And I don't recommend pulling stuff. I mean, if they're sending out as, if they're receiving email on their work email and they're sending out as their personal email on Gmail, fine, you can do that, but don't send out as their work email on Gmail. All right, so any web hosts that don't work well with Cloudflare. So anyone that uses Cloudflare Enterprise as a force will not work with Cloudflare, such as Rocket.net. Rocket.net is fantastic. They're a great host, but you cannot use your own Cloudflare with them because they have their own Cloudflare Enterprise. But with them, you don't have to worry about really my security rules and stuff like that. They do a fantastic job over there. Ben is fantastic at Rocket. So if you want to use Rocket and don't worry about the Cloudflare portion, stuff like that. Anyone else, such as WP Engine, they have their own little Cloudflare Enterprise now. You have Cloudways, has the Cloudflare Enterprise. You can't use your own Cloudflare with them. You'll have to use theirs. That's only if you have their advanced security service on WP Engine or Cloudways Enterprise on Cloudways. If you don't use those type of services with them, you can use your own Cloudflare account and just point the IP addresses and stuff like that. Shopify is another one uses Cloudflare Enterprise. There's a little way of making it so you can use your own Cloudflare now with Shopify, but most of the time they have their own enterprise and do it from there. All right. Where does PatchStack sit with a Cloudflare? PatchStack is kind of I would say they're a on the fly patching service before exploits are deployed, is how I would find them as. There is another part of your stack, your security stack. So Cloudflare is the front end to block stuff from the internet. WordFence can do stuff by IP address as well, or the application stuff, application security, and PatchStack can do that as well. But PatchStack also can fix a vulnerability within a plugin before the patch is released, and that's their advantage. Namecheap, yeah, Namecheap works fine with Cloudflare. I use Namecheap for my own domains, no problems whatsoever.
All right, we have about 10 minutes left. So if you have any final questions for Troy, please make sure to ask them. So
normally if you get disconnects, it's firewall related type thing. So something's blocked, could be blocking them, could be Cloudways blocking them. If you're using Cloudflare, it could be Cloudflare blocking them. They have an IP range, PatchStack. It's listed on their website. So you may have to whitelist these IP addresses or their CIDR notations. Sometimes you have issues adding CIDR notations, but if you add their IP addresses on Cloudways and on Cloudflare, you can do it under the tool section. There's WF, and then your security WF, and then tools. You got all their IP addresses in there. So any site within your account on your Cloudflare can globally be whitelisted. No, I mean, there's no problem switching transactional email services. So if you go to Postmark will give you their DNS records to add, and then you just turn off your SendGrid service after you make sure all your sites are no longer using them, and then you're fine. Postmark will be able to send, no problems. You can have, I mean, honestly, you can have both. You can have SendGrid and Postmark up there. As long as the DNS records are up there, that's all that matters. But if you're done with SendGrid, after you get everyone moved over to Postmark, you can delete their DNS records out of there and then close your account.
all right, we will start the wrap-up slides, but you can still put questions into the chat. So getting WordPress help outside of meetup times. We have an info page for the Baltimore WordPress Meetup group, and you can visit it, which it includes information on how to get help. Our next meetup is a joint meetup with the WordPress Accessibility Group, and that will be on October 3rd at 11 a.m. That will be how accessible are WordPress forms by default, a comparison of 7 different WordPress form plugins and how well they do out of the box. And it looks like no more questions have come in. So thank you very much, Troy. It was great having you, and we really appreciate your information and knowledge.
No problem. If you have any questions, just send me a message or ask Gene to get in contact with me.